All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 244 for the week of June 2nd. I am your host, DBQ Hams. Oof, what a week. What a week. We got a long holiday weekend here in America that we came off of, which meant everything feels a little bit out of whack, but hopefully that long weekend gave you a chance to play some games, have a little bit of fun, whether it was by yourself, with some friends, with some family. Joining me tonight on our show is a friendly face back after a while of hiatus. SwissGuard, how are you, sir? Welcome back.
Doing well. It's good to be back on the show.
And for you audio listeners, there was a smile in Swiss's voice there. You could just hear that smile. Like, he is glad to be back. Now, the real question is there a hot burning game or an issue that brought him back to the table? Or is he just glad to carve out some time in his schedule to join us tonight?
I just missed you guys.
Aw, shucks. Well, rounding us out tonight, as always, is Game Logic. Game Logic, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. I was vacillating on my choice there. It's been 2 days of 9-hour meetings with 8:30 starts. So with yesterday I didn't eat, and then today it was difficult to find time to use the bathroom, and each day the dog has struggled while I've had my butt in a seat for meetings, long series of meetings with no break. So that's how I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could take a little break tonight and talk a little bit of games. So we've got a little bit of what we've been playing in terms of some new items or new to us. And then we've got some headlines. Today we had the Sony State of Play, so we'll probably talk about that a little bit as well, which I'm glad. SwissGuard, I'm glad as our resident Sony bravado speaker that we are glad to have you here. And then we'll round out with anything else that we've been playing over the course of time. So let's go ahead and get us started tonight. And Swiss, since you are back after a while break, what has been on your playlist? What have you been cycling through? I know you said you've been traveling. Have you taken your Switch with you? What are you playing?
I did take the Switch with me on one trip, and actually made a little progress in Octopath Traveler, so I'm still chipping away at that one. But one of the big games that I've been playing, I played, was Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Switch. So that one, my kids had kind of been excited about picking that up. So I actually got it on day one, and on another Discord server I was on, there was a little contest to see who could reach 100% completion in Kirby and the Forgotten Land first. So I started to attack that, and I happened to get sick that week, so like laying in bed, I kind of was able to shoot ahead of the competition. But so yeah, I that's like the first game I've beaten in a long time, and certainly the first game I've gotten like 100% completion in like
Did
years.
you play that? Did you play it co-op with any of your kids?
No, I've wanted to make progress. So
co-op is not bad. I've played some co-op with my son. It's enjoyable. It is, it's not easy mode. So that's the other question. Did you play on easy mode, or did you play on the higher difficulty?
I didn't do breeze. It's like they called it wild mode and gentle breeze mode, or spring breeze mode, or something. I did play on wild mode. I shouldn't be too hard on my kids. They have beaten the game as well. But yeah, I found I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. So it was when they first announced it, I think I was talking with you, and it seemed like a bit of a ripoff of Mario Odyssey, the way you can assume those other abilities, like the traffic cone ability or the Carby, but when you play it, and like, as you know, it has that much more of an almost a Mario 3D Worlds feel. It's still you're still getting from point A to point B on the level, and so it's somewhat linear that way. But you have more. It's like it falls in between. You have more freedom, I think, than like a Mario 3D Worlds, but it's not as kind of open-ended as Mario Odyssey. But the character, the Kirby upgrades are all fun, and there was just enough challenge, I think, finding some of the final Waddle Dees, and then the boss fights were well, one of the Waddle for every boss fight, you in order to get 100% completion, you do have to beat the boss without taking any damage. So that was usually a fun challenge to like beat the boss like completely.
And there's some of those challenges where like beat the boss without any powers or within a certain time period. So you really dug into this game to get 100%.
Yeah, it was good. The final boss was really tricky until I realized like one of the top upgrade, you go past Meta Knight and then there's like a Morpho Knight, and Morpho Knight has this warp ability, so you can kind of do like a super dodge type thing. And once I got that and applied that towards the boss, there are some little upgrades that you can get to increase your attack power and stuff. So once I applied all that, I was able to beat it. So, and the kids were pretty thrilled with it, and there was a lot of co-op. And the good thing about Kirby and the Forgotten Land, like as you were talking about, the co-op isn't cheap co-op. Like the player 2 little brother mode actually is contributing to the game and feels like a character. It's not just an afterthought. So
yeah, it's not just a kind of Starbit baby kind of picking up things. You actually, I found it very helpful in boss battles as well. It kind of burns through things pretty quickly. Nice. Well, I'm glad that you had a chance to dive into that and that your whole family has enjoyed it. It's a really solid game. And yeah, I have not gone back to it in a few months, but hearing you talk more about it, it seems like maybe it's destined for a family vacation time.
How far did you get?
Third world?
Okay. So
Fourth world, maybe?
some of the Kirby abilities were kind of funny. Like, I don't know if you got to the Kirby drinks from a fire hydrant ability, and then he's like a giant water balloon, and just like I thought it would be kind of, like I said, I enjoyed it more than I thought. I thought it was kind of like a ripoff of Odyssey, and it definitely stands on its own. So
nice. Well, let's take a tonal shift from Kirby and the Forgotten Land over to Bungie and Destiny 2 last week. They had Season of the Haunted launched. This is the second season within the current iteration, which brought with it a few kind of one big communal event, a couple dungeons maybe, but it really brought back the Leviathan. So Game Logic, you've been digging into Season of the Hunted. How much have you been playing? You have the season pass, right? So you end up with the artifact and running some of those encounters on the Leviathan. Then how's your experience been?
So, well, number one, I actually need to do an alibi because I have a couple questions about Kirby.
Well, the fact that you have questions about a Nintendo cartoony game, I will let you have the floor, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to know, so Swiss, you are a gamer who has an appreciation for difficulty. And I was of the impression that that is not what Kirby does. Or did you find it, have they ratcheted that for this iteration, or is it still?
No, it wasn't difficult to get through the levels. The difficulty was beating whatever boss fight without taking a hit. So in a way it's like that, so like getting an achievement type challenge was where it came in. The final boss was difficult. I would say that was the only difficult boss. Like the final boss was a challenge, because you go through like whatever 3 iterations of evolution. But no, that's why it was also good for my kids. And there's a lot of places in the game where you could just go through the sequence of boss battles in like the Coliseum or something, and that's what they like to do. So my 4-year-old is beating the bosses pretty quickly. So no, it's not like I wouldn't say it's like a hardcore game.
Gotcha. And did you play Yoshi's Crafted World?
No, my wife did. She played that one a lot, but no, that one didn't really appeal to me.
Right. And I guess part of my question too is you have also mentioned on the show, and you and I have talked about how like Nintendo games, there's a find the whimsy kind of component to their design and entertainment value, and that is often very upfront and in your face in a Nintendo game. Sometimes to the point where, again, going back to the difficulty thing, like it's really hard to find that scratch. For, I don't know, for, what a core gamer might be looking for. But I was wondering, did Kirby put too much of a sheen of that, factor kind of up front to where, again, it made trying to find the appealing part of core gameplay difficult?
No, I mean, it definitely is whimsical, but like the pacing is good. So the levels don't feel like they stretch on forever. But, and there's like 6 or 7 levels per world, and each world has it. It was kind of like, I did like kind of a little bit of the level design. They didn't really hammer home the fact that it's kind of like an Earth-like planet or whatever, but, it was neat having like a beach level with kind of rusted old industrial equipment kind of. So there was just enough there. There was one of the bosses like was an armadillo that like made like crafts. It was just like, and they call it silly dillo or something. It was just enough to be like, that's kind of funny, that's cute, but like it didn't beat me over the head. And combine that with the pacing and having like, especially since my goal from the beginning of it was just to get 100%. So I've also viewed it as like a checklist challenge. That I think the checklist challenge was what helped propel me forward. But the pacing was good, and then you have nice little mini games that exercise each one of Kirby's abilities. So, Kirby has the little spike ability. So each iteration up, there'd be like a little challenge where you might have 30 seconds to get from point A to point B, and you're forced to use that ability. So it trains you on the ability, and it's like a nice little side mini quest thing. So they did a good job kind of just polishing the game so that it could be appealing.
Very cool, very cool. And DB, one other change. I need to do a title swap with you and talk about Halo Infinite versus Destiny 2.
The floor is yours.
All right. So I've been playing a good chunk of Halo Infinite. It has officially crossed the Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War level of obsession. And so there's a few different things going on. Number one, part of the challenge that, where that cropped up at the point where I would have swerved and switched to a different title is I was playing the game and I kind of felt like I was peaking with how well I was able to do on mouse and keyboard. And so I really started digging at this topic of controller-based aim assist. And I started finding radically different things all over the internet and Reddit and the different forums and on Steam. And, at one point back in November, there were notes that were saying that there was no controller-based aim assist on PC. That basically PC had no aim assist. And so no matter what you did, if you were in crossplay, you were always going to be at a disadvantage to console players. But then a little later, I started finding threads that said, no, there is controller-based aim assist. And in fact, it's a little more on point than console-based controller aim assist. But one of the defects that is apparently out there is that if you interact with the keyboard or the mouse at any point, then controller-based aim assist seems to become disabled. And it's really kind of uncertain and unsure, if you get it back or when you get it back. So you can imagine on a gaming PC setup, types of things that could happen is you could put your controller down on your desk and it could vibrate, and that would trigger your mouse. At that point, have you lost aim assist? I don't know. So where I've been playing on the other side of the room, I have sort of kind of almost an L-shaped desk configuration where I have a what I call an auxiliary control station up against the wall. And so I've been sitting my controller over there. I have not been putting my phone actually on my gaming desk, so I don't trigger any of that. And so I've been forcing myself to play with controller to see if there's any difference. There is. It hasn't quite led to a difference in win ratio, but similar to some of the threads that I've been seeing out there, you know, where my accuracy with mouse and keyboard is typically in the, you know, high 20s percent. When I'm on a controller, it's, you know, anywhere from 40 to 47%, which is significantly different. And so I have done one of the things that I have historically said that I could not be bothered to do, which is I have broken out my Elite Controller V2, and I have actually reconnected the paddles. If you guys remember when I talked about this before, that was one of the first things that I did was rip those paddles off the bottom, and they had been sitting in the case, never touched for some number of years. But I actually took the paddles and put them back on, and brought down the Xbox. I think it's just called the Xbox Accessories app, and have gone in there and configured a profile where I have mapped grenades to just the left side paddles and melee to the right side paddles, and both paddles, so that you know if I'm in a panic and I just reach for the buttons, I just reach and grab for left or right squeeze. I don't worry about trying to trigger the upper or lower paddle. And I've been playing with that. The other thing is, I think I'm slowly starting to be converted over to I don't know if I want to say believer, but definitely to a point where 343 Industries' approach to the design of Halo Infinite multiplayer, and to a certain extent the progression system, doesn't bother me. And that may just be because I've kind of lived in it, and that may have been their whole point. And if so, well, I shouldn't say it. I'm pretty certain that was their point, and they looked at it from the perspective of these types of things aren't going to bother the type of person who lives in Halo. I don't know how much deference and consideration they gave to, okay, but what about the other demographic of your user base who, you're right, isn't the Halo obsessed? How is it going to kind of feel to them in terms of onboarding? But maybe that was a risk that they decided was worth taking. And by that, what I mean is, part of my turnoff with Halo has always been you guys have heard me refer to it as the goofy modes. Like, playing Halo is not a matter of going in and playing just Team Slayer. That's what a lot of people would love to do, but it's similar. It has become similar to the way I approached Call of Duty during that year I was obsessed, where I started off only playing free-for-all. I then said, let me try some of these other modes, and I tried Team Deathmatch, and then I really loved and fell in love with that. And then I started expanding that to other modes, and I was like, there's a set of these modes that I actually like. I don't like all of them, but out of like 12 modes in Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, I eventually settled on somewhere around 6 or 8 that I would play. And then I added hardcore to that, because I was like, let me try hardcore, and I actually found that I didn't dislike hardcore. I really liked it. And so in the vein of, eating your Wheaties and your peas and carrots, there's actually things that I enjoyed, and maybe 343i's approach was, those things that are outside your comfort zone are good for you, and you might actually come to enjoy them. And so the way I've been playing it is I haven't gone in and played just Team Slayer all night. I have gone in and I've warmed up with a couple matches of Team Player, but then I actually play the challenges to try and get through the progression. And so, when the challenge says, hey, you need to play land grab, I go play land grab. When it says you need to win Fiesta, I go and I push hard to win Fiesta. If it says you need to play Rumble Pit, I play, a mode that's only accessible via Rumble Pit, I play Rumble Pit. Now, the only thing that continues to grate me is when you have challenges that require you to do something in a mode or play a mode that is only accessible via Quick Play or Rumble Pit, which means you become subjected, enslaved to the, to the dictatorship of pseudo-random number generation. and you could spin that roulette wheel and be in that mode for 10 matches while you're waiting on, mode X to come up. That can get frustrating on a night when you do that and it never comes up. I have gone into that on some modes in Rumble Pit or Quick Play and gotten like the same mode 5 times in a row and like thrown my headphones down and like walked away in frustration. But by and large, like, I'm kind of finally buying into the notion of playing Halo for a couple hours and playing Team Slayer, playing Tactical Slayer. I've come to really enjoy that because it's similar to Call of Duty Hardcore. Playing Land Grab, playing Fiesta. With a buddy that I play with, we've been tending to go over and play Fiesta on nights where it's really sweaty in Team Slayer, because it is skill-based matchmaking. And so up until this week, wherever I am in skill-based matchmaking, I was getting matches where I would just go on like a tirade, like go 24-4-2 in a match. But whenever I played with him, like it would be a struggle, right? Because he's been playing for 20 years and whoever we get match made with, just like, it's just ridiculous. But starting this week, I've noticed an elevation in the difficulty of the matches that I've been getting cycled into. So it feels like, and so I don't know if it's tied to Battle Pass progression, which is a thing that I don't really like, because I'm just like, look, if I'm at level 100 of Battle Pass, I shouldn't just be arbitrarily thrown in with harder opponents. But it may be because of how I've been performing in matches. So it's a weird slipstream to go through that evolution. But like I said, this week I've hit the point where, just like I did during that year of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, it's like the first thing I do is I sit down and I say, am I playing Halo Infinite tonight? And right, so that automatically means there's a 50% chance that that's the game that I'm going to be playing, on most occasions.
Can I ask you a question about, you made a comment about Halo Infinite being for Halo players, but isn't the fact that it's like a free-to-play game mean that they were seeking a broader demographic?
They definitely were. Like I said, it's hard to visit the intentions of their design, and their business model and their approach. Where I am right now is my guess is they took the risk that because of free to play, they were going to invite people in the door, and their hope was that because the mode that I'm in right now, I feel like is the mode that most Halo players are in. It seems like Halo players roughly bifurcate into 2 demographics. There are people who play Team Slayer all the time, and then there are people who play kind of what I have always called these goofy modes. And at DBQ, I probably remembers, but like there were nights with casual adult gamers where I would get invited to play Halo. And unfortunately for me, it wouldn't be fun because we wouldn't play the modes that were kind of patently understandable. I was always getting pulled into like all these crazy goofy modes that like I just didn't enjoy because, one of the things is in Call of Duty, the rules of how to play, they, at least for Black Ops Cold War, they come up on a screen and they linger there. They're persistent for minutes while you're sitting in a lobby, right? And you can relatively come to understand it. Like Halo modes, if you don't know like how to play them, like you can get dropped in a match, they come up on the screen for a split second. I feel like you don't really get exposed to them for all. You get dropped in a match and you're like, what in the heck am I supposed to be doing? Like, especially back in the day when they had like the goofy vehicle racing modes, I'm like, I have no idea what this objective here is. So yes, I feel like they were seeking a wider demographic, but I feel like they were seeking the wider demographic of people that they were going to try and onboard. And because it's free to play, we're hoping to kind of ensnare in the Venus flytrap and convert them over to this way of life. Call of Duty to me is different because it does. Now I didn't play enough of the Master Chief Collection to really understand what that progression system was or whether it mattered. But in Call of Duty, the way Call of Duty operates, at least when I played it Black Ops Cold War, a player who insists on just playing free-for-all still gets rewarded. There are some points where they're going to hit a little friction where it will say, hey, you need to do something with a sniper rifle or you have to do something in a certain mode. but generally the way Call of Duty works is like you just ignore that daily objective and wait for it to cycle out, right? Or you just don't even. I think you can actually choose your daily challenges, so you can just kind of avoid that whenever you it's incredibly rare where you get jammed into a corner where those are the only things left because they're constantly cycling through. It's not like Halo where I think there's like a set of, let's say, 30 weekly objectives and like they're finite. Like you don't get to just cycle and ignore them. You can swap them and ignore them for a little bit, but in the course of a week, you're going to have to do some of those challenges in order, if you want to hit the bonus progression points. So I feel like Call of Duty has a framework where, like I said, you can still be rewarded just playing free for all. You can still be rewarded just playing team deathmatch. You can still finish the battle pass. The way Halo Infinite's structured, you really can't ignore those things if you really expect to, in any degree of efficiency, progress through the battle pass. You're going to have to participate in those other modes, which to me means inherently onboarding into the Halo multiplayer lifestyle, which I've always felt is kind of inherently different than other multiplayer PvP shooters.
This has been months that you've stayed in this kind of Halo cycle here. So it's been a progression in terms of your kind of hesitancy with it, your reluctance in some areas, your kind of love of it, your pushback, and now kind of really feeling the groove for it. So it's been, for those listening and for us following, it's been an interesting kind of journey with you.
Yeah, it's definitely had hills and valleys. It's definitely been, this is the first time that I've enjoyed it mechanically. It always felt like too slow and sluggish for me. So I finally kind of acclimated to that. And then there was a point where like the stingy progression thing just like really drove me into a valley that I was really angry about. But again, I've come to love the elegance of the combat when you're on the battlefield. And as has been the case with a lot of these science experiments that we've done, what we've asked ourselves in many cases is, hey, go live with the thing for a little bit, right? Prove that like it's really as much of a friction oriented experience as it seems to be. And in this case, I've come around to where it's not as bothersome as I felt it was kind of standing on the outside.
All right. So I'm going to dive us into news and segue into my game as well, because one of the news stories we have is that Diablo Immortal mobile came out a day earlier than initially described. Right? This was kind of telegraphed as coming out on June 2nd. Then last week we heard that it was actually going to release on the mobile storefronts on Google Play and on iOS App Store the day before. And so I had a chance to dive in, play a little bit on multiple different platforms. I played on phone, on Android, I played on iPad, and then today I've had the chance to play on PC as well. So right now I'm level 29, which means I've sunk some time into it, but also in true Diablo fashion, they churn those levels out pretty quickly, because it's not even until level 28 that you open up some of the market and some other things. There's still things gated behind level 35.
So you're level 29 after a day, 2 days?
A day, yes.
Okay. That is not Halo Infinite progression, so there's clearly something there to scratch at. It'll be interesting to hear you talk through that.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see where that cap is. I've seen people in chat talk about people at level 60 already. In Diablo fashion, you probably do hit a cap, and then you have kind of points on top of that as your power piece. You probably also, your level, once you hit a cap, it becomes more about gear and that as well. So I think that I can see where the level progression piece starts to flatten out. It'll be interesting to see. I have not run into, where that free to play kind of gating starts to show up. That there is, it is, for all intents and purposes, it's Diablo. It plays it really well. It plays on same as what you would expect a Diablo game on the computer. It's other than the fact that the camera stays zoomed in, it doesn't have the kind of, as Diablo 3, you had that ability to kind of zoom in a little bit or zoom back out to give your perspective that you wanted. Haven't found a way to kind of change the POV in Immortal yet, but it does come also with controller support for PC, also with controller support for mobile devices as well, and that seems to work really well. Everything binds nicely. It does not have a roll function like Diablo 3 did. Diablo 2 Remastered didn't have a roll function either, which I guess makes sense because it would be difficult to add that in on a touchscreen device. But for the most part, I've actually been playing on touchscreens. It works really well. It looks really good. It scales pretty nicely. Playing it on an older Samsung Galaxy 8, it runs pretty smooth. Things are on low or medium. Playing on my computer, everything's set to high and 60 frames per second. On mobile, it's 30 frames. iPad, it's running pretty good. The challenge is that it's not necessarily a resource hog, but it's a memory hog. That the storage space that it needs is about 12 to 13 gigs, which is, it's 21 gigs, 25 gigs maybe on a PC, which isn't unreasonable, but some of the kind of comments within the first day from people online really are about the amount of storage space that it's taking up on their mobile devices and how much they need to clean up to be able to do that. What it meant, I'm playing it on my phone. I didn't download any of the additional data. The initial download is about 4 gigs, which gives you kind of the opening area, gets you through all the tutorials, but you can stay in that open area and enemies level with you. So they scale. So it ended up, still being functional in terms of kind of grinding away. I couldn't do some of the instance dungeons that pop up because I needed the additional content. So after downloading all of it on iOS, including an HD pack, which my iPad doesn't support, so I didn't have an option of not downloading that. Or I could have, but I would have had to stop it in the middle of, like, really it's packaged up into all kinds of smaller packages in the download that run in the background. That not only are you downloading cosmetics and voice packs, you're downloading each little individual area so that you can move between them. So if you don't have certain things downloaded, you're kind of gated off until you download that. There's end game content that downloads as well. So once it's all downloaded, it runs pretty smooth. It is full on Diablo. The monetization of it is not as in your face as I feared. It's the daily kind of, here's your daily rewards. There are kind of group instance rifts that throw you into an instance dungeon that you spend crests to do. You spend a currency to do those. That can be earned in game and also purchased, or you can purchase having the more the legendary ones versus the normal ones gives you a legendary gem. It seems like a lot of the things within the store outside of currencies are materials to craft gems, and the socketing of gems really seems to be where if there was a pay to win aspect of it, that seems to be where that comes in terms of purchasing enough materials and crafting materials to be able to do legendary gems. But at level 29, I've earned a couple of them. I've earned 1 or 2 of them already through some of the rifts and through the story. So it's not impossible to do. I will be curious though, is when I hit kind of a power level kind of cap ceiling, that if there is that push of needing to have the purchases to be able to do that. The other piece of purchases is in fashion of any game at this point. There's a battle pass, no surprise. Battle pass has it's not a free battle pass. Well, it is a free battle pass, and then there is a paid tier as normal. The paid tier is only $5. I was kind of expecting the $10 kind of paid tier, which is the norm within a console game. And then, as true to form, there's also, the boosted battle pass, which is $15, which jumps you up 15 levels already, things like that, which is not, it's not surprising because Activision does the same thing with Call of Duty, right? That's not a surprise there at all. It also does some of the additional kind of pay hooks that I've seen in other mobile games, where in addition to a battle pass, then there's also I don't know what they call it, your boon, that every day when you log in, you get free items, right? You get some crafting materials, maybe you get some stuff that will, a normal crest that allows you to run the rift, get more gear. But you could also pay $10 a month to get boosted daily logins, in addition to additional storage space and more access in the marketplace, things like that. And so that's not that different. I mean, I've seen that in other places. It's definitely different in Diablo. I haven't kind of dug into the systems enough to know if that additional daily amount really creates a benefit. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up buying the battle pass, at least for the first month, for $5 to kind of give it a go. It's enjoyable sitting on the couch, sitting in bed, playing some Diablo. I think it, the same way it was enjoyable on Switch, it's just a little prettier. It runs kind of what I would have expected. I've been playing in the Torchlight Infinite beta, closed beta, for the past few months. They both play pretty similarly. The graphics are definitely different. These are definitely Diablo graphics versus kind of the cel-shaded, cartoony World of Warcraft fare of Torchlight. But they both play pretty similarly. The level of detail is impressive within the game. I'll be curious to see how this plays out in terms of its economic model, how it plays out in terms of player base. One of the things that it has been fun is that there are shared spaces. So as you're running around kind of grinding, you often encounter other people. You can tell when they're doing a story mission because they're fighting invisible spaces on the level that, there must be something there that they're fighting. But then there's other times when there are just world enemies. There's not only just kind of, your standard graveyard enemies, but there's also world events that pop up that everybody has you can kind of join in. And so it makes it pretty nice to be able to be wandering around doing some grinding and pop in and help somebody else out, or kind of end up kind of journeying with a group of a few people as you go through just grinding and doing it that way. Also, there's dungeons that kind of matchmake, and so it's pretty seamless and pretty fluid in terms of the ability to kind of come in and out in terms of group settings and solo play as well.
So before I ask you any questions, you're drinking water now. Are you good, or do you need a break?
No, I was losing my voice. Sorry, allergies. But yeah, go ahead. Questions away.
No, I get it. I don't want to push you over the edge if you need Swiss or I to get on the line for a while. So help me out, just because I haven't followed the pattern on this the whole way through. So it's available on iOS and Android?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And PC.
Okay. And then the complaints that you've been seeing on mobile and storage space, have you noticed any trend? Is that mostly from Android people? Because your iPhone minimum now is like their lowest end model is like 128 gigs. So I'm wondering if this is lots of people on.
Sorry, I think it is people that are, kind of still riding it out with older devices. That yes, like that's the dichotomy in that conversation of people that have, running an older phone versus a newer model, as Tao has a newer model and had no problem downloading the 13 gigs. So it really, like, yes, if you're running something that's within the last year or two, you've probably got 64 to 128 gigs in your storage space is just fine. So,
well, I mean, even if you're on a newer phone in Android, I mean, there are lots of like lower end Android One phones that are like 32 gigs. Like they have like the bare minimum storage. So I'm wondering if, and lots of people buy those phones because they're incredibly inexpensive, and they're often now at, you know, where smartphones used to historically be, where there used to be like a free tier. So yeah, that's interesting. Have you played? I may have missed the thread a little bit. Have you played on PC?
Yes. Yep. Played on PC today. It launched today on PC. So I've had a little bit of time to play on PC, a couple levels there. It's smooth. I mean, I think it plays exactly what you would expect, right? You have hotkeys and you're clicking on things. It is, I think because of the zoomed in camera and the fact that on PC, I probably should turn down some graphical settings so I don't get as much explosions, special effects aspect of it, because I'm often losing my cursor. And I think part of that is because it is zoomed in so much that the characters are much bigger than I'm used to in like a Diablo 3 or classic Diablo 2. So where you have a little bit further pulled back camera and your cursor is more pronounced, so it's easier to know where you're hitting. But other than that, plays great, plays really smooth. It's, makes a whole lot of sense to put it on PC because people are going to put it on PC anyway, so they might as well integrate it into the store officially.
So does it play like it's a desktop app? So Windows has these UWP games that it has in the Microsoft Store that so if you've ever played like the what is the big racing franchise from Gameloft, that Asphalt?
Yeah.
So if you've ever played Asphalt, right? Asphalt has a app that can be played on Windows 10 in the store. It is a UWP app, and so it's a mobile game that's been brought over, and when you put it up on screen, it is a mobile game. It is not Forza, it is not Gran Turismo. You can tell the difference. I'm not saying that it's bad, but just saying you can tell that it is of a game design fidelity that is a lesser than a full-blown like third-party publisher big, or first-party publisher big game. Does Diablo, I mean, this is not supposed to be Diablo 4, and it's as you mentioned, it's a zoomed-in camera, which makes me feel like it's a camera that was brought in enough so that there's not as wide a field of graphical detail to have to display on the screen. Like, is this a desktop game, or is it not? Can you tell?
That's a good question. Other than the kind of low res title screen that says tap to play, right, which probably tells you, but if I have a controller hooked up, it does give you controller prompts, which is probably the same on mobile as well, that it would give you controller prompts. So it is possible that it's running out of BattleNet, so it's kind of running right through Blizzard that way, but it's very possible that it is just simply the mobile APK, running there, because of the way that everything else looks proportion wise looks exactly the same as it does on a mobile device, just a little bigger. So it's very likely that that's the case, which also kind of makes sense. Like it's not a PC port of a mobile game. It's the mobile game on PC.
So you can feel that it's not really a full-blown PC app, and really then the point of playing on desktop is just so that you have continuity, right, on a different display surface, for mobile, rather than like, staring at a small phone screen like all the time to progress.
Yeah, I think that the benefit is cross progression. So if I'm logged into BattleNet, my character is on all three devices, as long, so yeah, it is more about if I'm sitting watching TV in the living room, I can be on an iPad. If I'm down here, I can be playing on the computer with a little higher fidelity, but the graphical settings are all the same. I mean, this again goes back to, it's probably the mobile app, because the graphical settings are all the same on PC as they are on mobile as well. So I'm not getting any additional fidelity or anything else. I do get an ultra, but really that's, I think, is just because it supports the high definition packs that are downloaded.
And my last question is, so So what you mentioned before, that it kind of puts those like daily reward things kind of in your face as soon as you log into the app on mobile. Does it do that on desktop as well?
That's a good question, because I haven't, this morning I played on iPad before going to work. And so when I came home and played it on desktop, that already had been claimed. So I think so. I mean, I think the pop-ups that I got were very similar to the pop-ups that I got in on a mobile client as well. So yes, I would expect. But at the same time, if you're playing any type of free-to-play mobile game, it's kind of par for the course at this point. One thing, it's really, it is that question of, if I'm going to be playing on a PC, would I rather be playing Diablo 3? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that's the question of, at what point does it become too free to play? And at that, am I better off just getting my Diablo fix with a full-blown Diablo game?
Yeah, and that daily rewards thing, as you mentioned, that is not a, maybe unfortunately, but whether it is or not, I mean, that's not a solely mobile thing. You get the same thing on Warframe. I want to say you get the same. I mean, you definitely get the same thing on Forza. You get the same thing, I think, on EVE Online. There's one other prominent game that I can't remember right off the top, but there's a prominent online free-to-play game where, like, you get stacks of rewards for consecutive days that you log in. I can't remember.
I mean, that's kind of the economies of a lot of these at some point, is to keep you in that economy. Yep. So let's move off of mobile and back to some big console news. Not big console news, but full-blown console and news about a full-blown console, which is PlayStation 5. Game Watch, you had the story here that both on PC Gamer, but originally over at Eurogamer, that Sony had a financial presentation this past week here, where they talked about that PlayStation 5 had outsold the PlayStation 4 in year one, but now in year two, well, I guess this is year two, that we are PS5 is underselling mainly because of supply chain constraints, which are related to not only parts and COVID-19, but also the Russia invasion of Ukraine and kind of geopolitical markets and things like that as well. Same reason, the geopolitical piece that we've seen things like Valve announced today that the dock for the Steam Deck is delayed indefinitely because of the parts where they were sourcing it from are having factory production issues and supply chain pieces. The same reason you saw Microsoft's earnings, projected earnings, go down. Their forecast went down a few from like 53 to 52 billion, in part because of currency and kind of where the dollar is within other international currencies related to global markets at this point in time. So what kind of stuck out to you here in this news story in terms of PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and the PlayStation 4 still selling as strongly as Sony tells us they are?
Nothing in particular. I just put the news story in the stack just because it was, industry news that came up. There was actually, so this was in association with I think it's a presentation that they've been giving about, Sony's strategic matters, given their outlook. And actually there's other details that are in that presentation that, a lot of the gaming community has kind of glommed onto. It is under heavier discussion, matters of kind of what their portfolio spread is going to look like over the next 4 years, and how they're investing more in live service games, and how, the way investment dollars are kind of peanut buttered around their portfolio will actually lessen for single player narrative, strong narrative, cinematic, driven kind of, that near linear, I always forget what it is, that near linear something, near linear wide path design that has kind of typified, Naughty Dog, Sucker Punch, and I think now, maybe not Insomniac. Insomniac is doing what I would equate to as being like true open world. But the matters in the portfolio are going to shift. Along with that is this story of what the PS5 hardware base is going to look like, and right now it's a matter of they've got plenty of demand, but they have an insufficient supply to meet that demand, and that is impacting their sales. Which if you looked at it at face value without taking those things into account, you would look at it as PlayStation 5 is not selling as well as Xbox Series or the Nintendo Switch, but what's actually the case is it's a supply constraint. The PlayStation 4 still makes up a good amount of earnings and revenue for them, for people who are making digital purchases on that console, which again goes back to why it maybe made sense to pump out another million of those PlayStation 4s while they're waiting for larger production on the PlayStation 5. They are sourcing from additional vendors because everybody's not able to pump out as many consoles, and as you mentioned, there are impingements based on world events around Ukraine and Russia. So it's going to be a thing. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It's weird to me, I guess. We're going to talk about PlayStation VR a little bit later. Again, just because it's a console platform and I haven't been paying as much attention to those, is PSVR 2 next year?
I think it's projected to be next year. Yes.
Okay.
We'll see what supply chain stuff impacts it, but yes, it's projected to be 23.
And the whole point of this article is that, it's going to be 2023, 2024 till they think that they're really going to come up to pace on, where they want PlayStation 5 production output to be, which hopefully, would make sense with wherever PSVR 2 comes out, because, putting that thing on shelves when there's an insufficient number of PlayStation 5s to really go along with it may not make a ton of sense. But we'll see. I mean, for people who are hunting and seeking for PlayStation 5s and for people who are looking at aftermarket sources, those prices have been coming down, but not to the point where the console is readily available outside your normal retail chains at even what you might think of as a reasonable markup. Like I paid $50 over MSRP for my PlayStation 3 when it came out, right? And I bought it in a bundle with a bunch of games on Thanksgiving weekend, and I paid a $50 premium to get a console that was still in relatively short supply. That to me is reasonable as a consumer. It's not great, but it's but like that's nowhere near what you're able to do today. You can't walk into a store and find these things, and when they do come in, they're gone, and you do not have any kind of aftermarket that you can turn to that has anything near like reasonable prices. They're still up in the 700s, 800s to buy these things. So it's unfortunate that there's people out there who obviously want the console who are just not going to be able to get it for another year or two.
So let's shift from not being able to buy a PlayStation 5 to what you're going to play on that PlayStation 5. And today Sony had their state of play for June. We don't know if there's another one coming. Again, without an E3, we've got a smattering of scattered announcements and press conferences and directs and releases. And Sony potentially kicks us off here in this season with the state of the play, about a little over about a half hour, both some PlayStation 5 games, but also some things coming out cross-platform, and a number of games for PlayStation VR. So I'm going to run through kind of the whole list and then turn it back over to you gentlemen. And Swiss, I'm glad you're here because I'm curious if there's anything that stuck out to you as a PlayStation 5 owner that looks pretty good to you or that got you excited. So we start off with the official, much rumored and official confirmation of Resident Evil 4, a remake that is coming in 2023, coming to PC, Xbox Series, and PlayStation 5, current gen only. Then we hit kind of a quick, not necessarily a quick sizzle reel, but a compilation of PlayStation VR 2 games, including a Resident Evil Village port for PlayStation VR 2, a new Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Retribution, so first-person shooter Walking Dead Retribution is out already on VR platforms. No Man's Sky VR for PlayStation 5. There's already a No Man's Sky VR option on PlayStation 4. And then we got a little more depth on Horizon Call of the Mountain for PlayStation VR as well. Then we got an Insomniac piece with Marvel's Spider-Man. And at first I thought, oh, it's the new Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3, which they teased last year. But no, this was all footage from Spider-Man Remastered, which is now coming to PC in August, which Tao is very excited about as not a PlayStation owner, but as a beefy PC owner that can run this and enjoy it. Then we got a little bit of video from Stray, the cat stealth game, which is coming in July. Then Callisto Protocol, which is an action horror, very kind of Dead Space vibes. At first, I even thought it was Dead Space, but it did not have kind of the iconic health meter stuck to your back that Dead Space did. Then you got Roller Dome, which is a cel-shaded roller derby with guns kind of battle. We don't know if it's multiplayer or single player, but it is done by the Ali World developers, which piques my interest. The art style looks very much like Sable, but if it is as smooth in terms of some of the combos that they were pulling off, feels very appropriate for Ali World as well. Then Eterna Knights, which is a nice kind of anime action combat game with a little bit of dating sim thrown in. So you get the best of both anime worlds there. And then we launch into an extended kind of teaser and some footage of Street Fighter 6 coming out in 2023. Then when it was announced that Tunic is coming to PlayStation, and we got a new trailer for Season, A Letter from the Future, which is kind of an adventure photo game, narrative game, which has been announced previously. And finally, we got a nice long sizzle reel of Final Fantasy 16 with a whole lot of summons. And even in those summon screens, it almost looked like, I don't know if you caught this, Swiss, almost looked like a fighting game where you had a health bar of two characters, one on the left, one on the right, as those summons or as the magic was happening. So I don't know if some of those large battles will end up in that kind of perspective, but that was one of the things that I caught that felt different than the action Final Fantasy 15 type of combat that they were showing here as well. And that was pretty much, I don't think I missed anything, but anything that Swiss that stood out to you, got you excited, or
as well, first standing out to me, the first thing that the one thing that I noticed was a lot of these games are coming out for PS4 and PS5. So it kind of goes back to the previous story.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, you're looking at PS5 potentially not really hitting its stride till 2024. Like this is a different kind of cycle, but I guess we're in a different kind of era when it comes to consoles now, where it's, how much do you want to pay for fidelity, I guess you could say. And but that was one thing that struck me. As far as the games themselves, it was rather underwhelming. Nothing really. I'm not a Resident Evil guy. I could imagine Resident Evil Village on like VR being good, because I remember DB, you had Resident Evil 7, I believe, on VR, and it was like a whole nother level of creep factor.
It was very effective in its eerie scareness. Yes.
So as far as like that market, that's probably an exciting announcement. That's not something that I play, and then you throw that in plus the Callisto Protocol. Like, I'm not into horror games, so I mean, what is like what's the tent pole here? Are they saying Final Fantasy 16 is their tent pole? I mean, you notice that that slightly. That didn't register for me with the Final Fantasy 16. It struck me as very like, you know what? This just looks like another round of whatever Final Fantasy is, right?
I think even some of the character designs, like in the King and things like that, all seem very similar to Final Fantasy 15 in some of those character designs.
It did seem more fantasy based than perhaps like, you know, you're not driving around on a highway in a car, but it just, I mean, it's number 16. At some point, you know, we've all been around long enough to know how these things kind of play out. So it's just, it didn't. I'm not going to get geared up about it. I guess if the roller dome, like that could have been an interesting thing, but it struck me as very empty. I don't know if you felt that way. Like it felt like I was watching an alpha, and I don't know if like just the cell shaded just isn't gonna work. But it just felt like a void of a game, and so
I can't tell like how much of that is by design. Like if it is a smaller encounter versus kind of, you know, 6 people in an arena type of thing, that if it is enemy versus enemy, it almost feels like it could be, I'm trying to think of, my friend Pedro, right? Like where it's almost like a puzzle as you're going through kind of those combat encounters in terms of how you're going to take enemies out. Like it could play like that, but we don't really know enough.
Yeah. So none of them really struck out to me. Street Fighter 6, like, but it's Street Fighter 6, so you know, that's not like it's like a PlayStation exclusive or anything like that.
So here's my thought is that in the past, right? Let's wind back the clock to 2015. And when there was a Sony E3 stage show, that this is the non-first party stuff that they would have shown. Like this is half that show. And they've saved another state of play to give us the Ragnarok piece, to give us some teaser about something else, you know, that all the big kind of Sony first party exclusives aren't really in here except for ports. And so I think that this is part of what is coming, and whether it's later in June or in July when we get another one. But yeah, I think there's a second half to this, to Sony's kind of portfolio for the coming year.
Yeah, I guess it's a little disappointing because maybe people are geared up for like an E3 like pseudo, like an E3 pseudo experience, but you know, it's just not going to happen. So maybe your expectations must be tempered. I don't know. I could potentially like maybe the Horizon Zero Dawn, like the Horizon Call of the Mountain game, might be interesting in a VR mode, but I don't know.
Game Logic, any thoughts here? We're ready to move on.
It's tough. This harkens back to years past of these E3 presentations where there was a large volume about Sony having won E3, and again, this is the kind of presentation that I look at it and I'm like, I don't get that judgment call. Like I like make it make sense. Like there are 3 games listed here as coming out in 2022. A survival horror game, which is not a universally appealing genre, an indie roller-based game that follows pretty hot on the heels of Ollie World, which just came out in January, so it can't be that big of a game for an indie studio to crank out. They don't have multiple dev teams in that studio, as far as I know, so it's got to be something that they maybe started production on as Ollie World was wrapping up, rolling off some of the senior personnel to start it, but it can't. I don't think it could be something that had like a really long lead time in development pipeline. And then this letter from the future thing, which is this a digital novel kind of thing?
It looks a little more exploration.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of
a artsy type.
Walking simulator. And I do not use that term like negatively. I'm just trying to like.
yes, it's not a huge game,
Yeah.
right? These are smaller titles. Yeah.
Right. Right. So, and then it's. I mean, I hate to say, but again, I'm drawing the parallels back to E3 presentation in years past, right? Then it's a lot of stuff that's out into next year, with a lot of ambiguity around like when next year. And as Swiss said, it's no tentpole, so it's just curious. I have been going with this belief that one of the things that they want is to convert the states of play over to where they are something with a relatively regular battle rhythm and cadence, and to get to a point to where they're a thing where like Jim Ryan doesn't need to personally review, right, the stack with an excruciating amount of detail, right? So I feel like, and I haven't looked back in past history and laid these things down, but I feel like these are things that are just starting to get scheduled to where they're going to happen on a pretty regular basis. And the approach is, when a state of play needs to happen, we're going to showcase whatever's ready in production pipeline for us to showcase, and announce, and that there are some criteria associated with like when is first announcement, when is like mid announcement, when is, you know, pre-release announcement. And so these things are becoming a little more auto magic, and that's why they just kind of come off as this you know, if I mean, DBQ, you're a comic book guy, right? So you're familiar with the you know, the preview trades and things that come out, right? That just don't always necessarily come out because there's something of note to really announce, but simply because they're on a regular battle rhythm and a regular cadence. So they go through and they hoover up everything that's kind of in these, you know, criteria based windows, and that's what goes into the mag, right? And I feel like that's kind of what state of play is becoming. So they're not necessarily associated or tightly coupled to the notion of, you know, big swing releases that are, you know, supposed to make a difference. The problem that there could be if that is the approach, or the problem that there is if that's not the approach, that actually makes kind of what gets put on display a little more concerning, right? Because here's the first show of June, which should kind of sort of telegraph what PlayStation 5 owners should be looking forward to in the fall and holiday season. And this does not appear to be it.
Right. I think that, like, I agree with you. It feels like, I mean, Nintendo Directs they've been doing that for a while, and when one comes down, it's like, oh, okay, let's just see what's coming out. But it may not, you know, I don't expect a Mario announcement every Nintendo Direct, and I agree with you as far as like the timing. It feels like it's bad because it was early June, and everybody's like, maybe states of play, we shouldn't be like, this is what PS5 owners should be expecting over the next year. This is what we got like in the battle rhythm. They should have not done it on June 2nd when people are like, what do we have instead of, well, you know, when people are thirsting for something, to grasping at straws for like an E3 like experience. So
right, or they pair it with, at the end of the state of play today, they would have said, and stay tuned coming in July for our next state of play with future announcements type of thing.
yeah,
Right, like you segue into, we're coming back, don't worry.
Now, what this could be is, this could kind of be a rope-a-dope to kind of set Microsoft up to basically have them, you know, shoot their shot and kind of put everything on show that people, you know, Xbox owners should be even mildly excited about, you know. So, I mean, their presentation was, 30 minutes today? The Xbox One on 6/12 is supposed to be an hour 90. But whatever Microsoft does for that hour 90, that's everything, right? And it could be everything for a very long time. And so, like you said, if Sony comes back with another state of play kind of late August, September, you know, it could come off as better PR, but I feel like it only does that if there's an announcement of a thing coming out in fall holiday season that we didn't know about.
And I think if they come back with one, or when they come back with one, it's mid-July or early August, because they would get some of that information out there before heading into Gamescom, because they'll have relevance over in Europe. So
But then again, if you're supply constrained on putting out PlayStation 5s, maybe there's not really a big, huge reason, right, to put a lot of kind of PR milking kind of content out there. Because the ones you are going to have on display, people are going to buy them, and there's no sense in kind of generating more of a panic of I have to get a PlayStation 5, right, until there's a reason, a supply-based reason to do so.
And that's, I mean, this is a really kind of a fun circle to chase, right? Of, as Swiss said, that there's a lot of things that are going to be coming out cross-generation on PlayStation 4 and 5 that it's hard to put an exclusive PlayStation 5 Sony first-party one out there to get people excited about a system that is that supply chained, and that there's not going to be enough systems out there to sell to the point where it's going to need to make back its money. So most things, you know, I don't know that we have that announcement with God of War, but, you know, Horizon Forbidden West did that for sure, is that we had both cross-platform, you know, we had both 4 and 5 versions of that game.
Does Nintendo have anything on the slate of significance for this holiday season or fall?
Pokemon. We had that announcement today. I mean, we knew Pokemon was coming, but we had some this week. We had some Pokemon news. So, yes, they've.
And Pokemon's an annualized release that's been trying to get to an even more kind of deterministic, strident release cadence and a sell through where they're kind of basically marketing to Pokemon people like Tao that, you know, you're going to buy Pokemon every year, right? Like Call of Duty. So,
well, and in Nintendo's fashion, I mean, we'll get a direct in August that will talk about, you know, we'll probably get a direct here in June, but we're only going to know about it a few days beforehand. And then we usually get something that lays out what their fall, you know, release schedule looks like. And they're on that kind of cadence of there's usually one first party game a month in the fall, sometimes one in the beginning of October and one at the end. So I would expect with Splatoon being in September that there's probably 2 games out there on Nintendo's first party piece that we don't know about yet that we'll find out at some point from.
Were you going to say something, Swiss?
I was just going to mention Splatoon is the other big-ish game. And then when is Xenoblade Chronicles 3?
End of July.
Okay. None of these are like Splatoon and Xenoblade. I don't think are like, they're not like up there with Pokemon, Mario, and Zelda. We already know Zelda's next year, so
it just feels across the board this is an incredibly dry landscape for console gamers in general.
For big titles, right? I think there's a plethora of small stuff out there if you're willing to look, and lots of opportunities for those small pieces to make a splash. Like you talked about last week with V for Vendetta, or V for Vampire, like that smaller game, V Rising. Thank you. That is getting some attention because the landscape is as bare as it is at this point.
Although V for Vampire was probably a better title.
All right, well, let's move into, we are heading into the home stretch here. We've running a little bit, so we're going to kind of just hit on a few other games here. Since I already teed up Destiny back in the beginning, Game Logic, do you have anything to talk about with Destiny in the current season here?
No, not really. The only thing I might put out is a public service announcement warning that Season of the Haunted, at least as far as I can tell, the first real content requires light level 1580, and so you might have some work to do if you didn't end there last season, which I did not. So I've definitely got to do some grinding. You as in typical Destiny 2 fashion, you get force fed and jammed into that initial like narrative piece right out of the cutscene. But after you fight that first adventure, which is a little hair raising, because you're deliberately forced into this situation where you were underpowered. But you know, for you to step off from there onto the first kind of in-stone, right, you got to be at light level 1580. So I'm having to flip over and do some grinding.
So I'll say, as somebody who's ran the Leviathan like public event aspects of it, whatever it's called, at 1550, not 1515, not 5050, 1515. Now at 1520, you know, it's a pretty it's a pretty engaging combat encounter because I can get smacked around pretty good. But you respawn relatively quickly. You get back in the fight. I've been able to contribute because you're not running it solo. Like, my family member and I ran it. He was at 1552, and when we were running it solo, it was tough. But because it's a populated area, very quickly does it become a 3 to 5 person fight, and so it was a good way to start leveling up, kind of diving in under level because you do start that grind then. Okay, Swiss, you are maybe not necessarily as regular as we all appreciate you at, but since you're back, let's give you the final word here. What other game do you want to talk about tonight?
All right. I'm not going to, just as a segue, I uninstalled Destiny 2 yesterday just to free up hard drive space. And you guys aren't making me regret that decision. But the other game that I've been kind of playing recently is It Takes Two, which was the one that won the VGAs. So I think I got it back in December on a Steam sale. And what they do is you can get the friend pass. So that's what my wife Vela got. They have it for free, but the game is like truly built to be multiplayer. Like it is impossible to play otherwise. So we've been going through that. One annoying note: it does require EA Origin, so you boot it up in Steam, and then like I was like having to like get my wife relogged back into an Origin on her account, her Origin account. She didn't know she had it because I guess she downloaded like a Battlefield 1 demo like a decade ago or whatever it was. But after that, like we've been playing it. So this game is like a contradiction to me. It's super creative with regards to the multiplayer. Once they decided like we're gonna just embrace a 2-player game and just make it like the most 2-player we can be. So there's a lot of asymmetric puzzle solving that you have to do. One character will have one ability, the other character will have a completely different ability, and then they build in the levels all the ways that you have to like. Most of the puzzles are like, I do this, then you can do that, then I can do this, and it's like the ordering type stuff. But with the weird abilities, so all of that's really creative and great. There's a lot of platforming, like in a 3D, and it feels very like what's the planet in Destiny 2 that's the water planet?
Titan.
Titan. Yeah, I feel like
Vaulted, may it rest in peace. Thank goodness.
My wife was having like Titan flashbacks. So, and she was frustrating me because like you have to wait, and one of us would be moving forward and you have to wait for the other person. I finally like told her to get off the mouse and keyboard, and she's on the Xbox One controller, which has been helpful for her. But like, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's the most it's not the tightest, and that might just be us on a platforming on PC is not something that we typically do, but it's definitely a thing. And then I would say like the game itself, like the plot and the setting and everything is also a contradiction because you have a very like mature, like actually like deep kind of topic, which is the daughter is upset that the parents are getting a divorce. So that, and her like, I guess like childish faith in this like book or something like prompts this like magic spell thing to happen that sets them on the adventure. So like there's this weird like solemnity there. But then you're going through these like your little like dolls, and you're going through like this very Toy Story or Honey I Shrunk the Kids-esque environs, and one of the levels you're dealing with like these like Apocalypse Now squirrels battling like wasps, and like and there's a sequence where literally my asymmetric character is flying a plane that the squirrels built using your underwear that they took off the clothesline. So it's like Red Heart underwear for the wings, and I'm flying it through all this stuff while my wife is in Street Fighter 2 mode battling a squirrel with an eye patch on top. And so you have to keep it level while they're fighting. And it was just like, it's really funny and awesome, like the creativity there, but then it's like, oh yeah, this game's about like divorce. So it's just, I'm not saying that it's like bad. It's just, it's discordant to me a little bit. And then I feel like the levels seem to stretch out. So like the creativity's there. There's some really awesome stuff. Like there's a level where you're like in like the space area that they built in the girl's room, and my wife's character May had these gravity boots, so like she's going up the walls and then it shifts the perspective, so the gravity is changing for her. Down is different. And I had this other ability where I could shrink or grow like Ant-Man. So like, and they mix it all up. So like there's all of a sudden like she's jumping and it makes her character go down towards the ground while I have to shrink and expand, and it's really cool and creative. And then it's just like, all right, you played through this and I want to move on. I want to get to the boss now. And you end up having to go for another like half an hour. So and maybe I'm just impatient and crotchety, but you know, I talked about the Kirby pacing. I could feel like I could experience a level, complete it, and get out. And this is, I guess, like the levels you could stop. They have that like 1917 like permanent camera experience where you like as you go to a different part of the level, it just seamlessly transitions. And maybe I'm just not into that, but it felt they felt like a drag. But like yeah, the creativity there, I can see why it was selected to win Game of the Year, but I also feel like it only won Game of the Year because it was as we talked about recently, it's a relatively dry period when it comes to tentpole titles for gaming. So, yeah, that's my take so far. We're like halfway through.
Nice. Well, hopefully you'll come back once you finished it, because I'll be curious how that story wraps up as well. So, all right, gentlemen. Well, that will do it for our show for tonight. Next week, we will be back with episode 245. And Tao will be back here as well on the mic hosting us. We've got, I'm sure we'll have some more news to talk about as we are ramping up into this June, and lots of Summer Game Fest and IGN's game announcements, let alone the Microsoft press conference that we talked about on the 12th. So we'll have plenty of news to keep us going, even if our gaming dry spell. But I'm sure we'll have lots to play, lots to talk about, and more to discuss as we keep going forward here in the next few months. So for myself, DBQ Hams, Game Logic, and thankfully SwissGuard, this has been the Enough to Keep Going podcast, episode 244. Thank you again for joining us, whether you're watching, listening, jogging along with us as we're running through our games. For myself, enjoy yourself. Have a good night. Take care. Play the games you like those you play with, and be kind to each other. Good night.